A boy named Jin Kazama is chased down by some bullies and beaten up. The boys ridicule him and order Jin not to come back to their town, but he gets ticked off and takes them down easily. He's about to get brutal, but is stopped by his mom, Jun, who is upset with him for being violent. Jin says he was provoked by the others, but Jin says he should be able to control his anger. As they sit down and talk, Jin wants to learn more about his dad, but is told to focus on his training instead. Later, he and Jun face off during a session, but Jin acts rashly, so Jun uses the Kazama Ryu Unsui technique on him. She withdraws at the last moment, and he is amazed by her skills. The training carries on, and Jin tires down, but keeps at it. Later, the duo is confronted by the drunken father of one of his bullies. Jin gets angered when he mentions his own father, so he's about to attack him, but Jin pushes away the drunkard and sends him away. Later, she warns Jin by saying he should use his skills for good. However, a demon named Ogre approaches them, so Jun goes to confront him. She asks Jin to find his grandfather, Heihachi Mishima, if something happens to her, and he reluctantly agrees. However, Ogre dominates Jun, so Jin tries to help, but is smacked away easily. Jun does her best to keep the demon distracted from her son, and an intense battle ensues. She is still no match for Ogre, so she has no other option but to sacrifice herself in flames to send the demon away. Jin wakes up to see what has happened and breaks down into tears. Later, he tries to find Heihachi and is taken by one of his bodyguards to meet him. After learning that he is Jun's child, Heihachi challenges Jin to a battle and dominates him easily. He is disappointed by what he sees and asks Jin to leave, but then he learns about Ogre, so Heihachi vows to train Jin to defeat the beast. Now Jin asks Miura to design flames on his pants, but she opposes it, as this might attract unwanted attention. Heihachi agrees with her and takes Jin to the training ring. He reveals that Jun's fighting style was simply a base for Jin, and now he will teach him the real battle techniques founded by Jinpachi, Jin's great-grandfather. Heihachi vows to break him down to prepare for Ogre, and Jin accepts. The first challenge is for Jin to only use his fists, and he struggles to do much without his legs. That's when Heihachi explains the various levels of training that Jin must undergo in order to become a true fighter. An intense training sequence follows, with Heihachi being completely ruthless. Now it's time for Jin to show his breaking abilities, but he's unable to do anything, so Heihachi shows off his strength before taking Jin for a dinner meeting with Ganryu. He presents Chang's pendant but asks for extra money, so Mishima orders Jin to take him down. He does so with ease, but hesitates before delivering the final blow. That's when Heihachi tells him he must be able to kill Ogre without hesitation or pacifism. Now Miura is ordered to analyze the pendant with Dr. Boskanovich, as it is rumored to be able to summon spirits such as Ogre. Miura also mentions that some of their advanced skill fighters have begun to vanish. Later, Jin continues his training and is beaten down regularly, but doesn't lose hope and keeps up with the torturous routine. He makes progress and begins to notice improvements in his fighting style. 4 years pass by, but Heihachi still sees fear in Jin's eyes and mocks him by saying he isn't ready for Ogre. This triggers Jin, and he unleashes his red electricity in an intense battle. He eventually comes out on top and impresses Heihachi with his strength. This is enough to prompt him to revive the King of Iron Fist tournament, which had been halted a while back. Now the news of Kazuya Mishima dying spreads all over the world, with everyone speculating his cause of death. Jin heads towards the tournament venue and is escorted by Miura, but meets Huarang, who seems to be a friend as well as a rival. After that, he meets some other fighters before everyone proceeds to their flight. On their way, Jin checks out some battle footage from the second Iron Fist tournament, but it goes off after a while because it had been deemed too brutal to watch. Huarang tells Jin about Paul Phoenix, who apparently came very close to defeating Kazuya, the champion from the first tournament. He also insinuates that Heihachi might have been the one who killed Kazuya, and he's backed up by Nina Williams. But Miura asks the team not to spread rumors. Everyone makes it to the Iron Fist arena, and then Jin meets Heihachi, who advises him to win the tournament if he wants to beat Ogre. Jin deduces that Kazuya was his father, so he confronts Heihachi about it, but he asks him to focus on his opponents instead. Miura greets the participants and introduces Heihachi, who gives them a brief speech and leaves. Hwarang enjoys some of the food, but Jin leaves the venue. He runs into a man named Leroy Smith, who attacks him for being associated with Heihachi. However, Jin ignores him, and then Heihachi asks Miura to put Leroy against Jin as his first opponent. Later, Jin meets Nina, who warns him against the Mishima family as their bloodline is tainted. Paul also shows up and mentions his teacher Marshall, who taught him how to fight against Kazuya. Jin learns how Heihachi was brutally beaten and humiliated by Kazuya at first, only for him to come back and redeem himself after miraculously surviving the onslaught. With this new information, Jin goes to meet Heihachi and confronts him about killing his father. Heihachi admits to it, but reasons that Kazuya was possessed by an evil force called the Devil Gene. We learned that this gene had corrupted Kazuya after giving him immense powers, and this was why Jin never mentioned anything about him to Jin. Heihachi then confesses that Jin also has the mysterious power, and it can attract devils like Ogre. This makes him feel guilty for causing his mom's death, but Heihachi motivates him to honor her sacrifice. After that, he makes plans with Miura to use Jin in order to capture Ogre. Later, Ling Xiaoyu meets Jin, and we learn that they are friends from school. She tells him about his opponent warming up for the match, and he figures that it's Leroy. The tournament kicks off and the crowd goes crazy. The fighters face off and Leroy seems to be at an advantage, but then Jin gets serious and thrashes him. Leroy remains intent on fighting despite having clearly lost and attacks Jin relentlessly. So Jin breaks his leg and beats him for good. However, he isn't happy with his win as he didn't want to hurt Leroy. Hwarang reminds him that everyone has a personal agenda here, and then Nina faces off against Xiaoyu. She acts casually during the battle, despite Nina giving it her all. And Jin worries for her, but Heihachi says she's just tiring out her opponent. Nina seems to gain the advantage, but Xiaoyu turns it around and defeats her with ease. Later, Jin goes to meet Leroy, who's outside his recovery room. He tries to reassure him that he's not a simple goon, but Leroy says that Heihachi is simply using him for his own purposes. Heihachi also shows up and rebukes Jin for wasting his time on Leroy. Then he takes Jin away and reminds him of his motivations. The next day, Jin faces off against Hwarang and they engage in a fierce duel. Jin remembers his mother's lessons but is conflicted over what Heihachi taught him as well. Now he activates his red lightning, but Hwarang is still able to keep up with him. The fighters go at it for a while, but then Jin unleashes a lightning jolt to win with conviction. However, he comforts Hwarang after the battle, and it angers Heihachi. Xiaoyu faces off against King and struggles at first but regains the advantage. Despite this, King easily defeats her, and the boys go to check up on their friend. Xiaoyu wakes up in the hospital later on and worries that Jin is going to lecture her, but he comforts her instead and motivates Xiaoyu to become better. King seems to be there as well, but leaves after spotting Jin. The next fight is Paul versus King, and the opponents go hard at each other. Heihachi tells Jin that the actual King was killed by Ogre, and he doesn't know who's behind the mask right now. He also reminds him that Paul only lost to Kazuya because of the Devil Gene. Despite his overpowered credentials, Paul is given a run for his money, so he uses his Phoenix Blast on King. It still isn't good enough, and he's eventually taken down rather easily, thus setting up the final match between King and Jin. Now Heihachi talks to Boskanovich about Ogre's holding cell and is suddenly attacked by a woman named Chang. She wants her mother's pendant back, but he knocks her down with ease. Luckily, Jin comes to her rescue, but she rebukes him for being associated with Heihachi. Then she reveals that Ogre was actually released by Heihachi in the first place. After hearing this, Jin offers to get the pendant back, but only after the finals, as he needs to see who King really is. She reveals that the fighter was an old disciple of King, who was here to build an orphanage with the prize money. The finals kick off, and King is shown to be a highly competent fighter. Jin battles him fiercely but is dominated. The others motivate him and it prompts Jin to unleash his red lightning, after which he knocks King down. Jin is announced as the new champion of the Iron Fist, but he goes to King and says that he can use his prize money to build the orphanage. However, Heihachi shows up and challenges Jin to one final bout. Despite being weak from his last battle, Jin accepts. As Heihachi taunts him, Jin learns that he was the one who released Ogre, thus being the indirect cause of Jin's death. Determined more than ever, Jin attacks Heihachi and they fight furiously. Jin dominates with rage, but Heihachi gets up again and awakens his true powers. Jin takes a beating as Heihachi unleashes his blue lightning, and then he's smashed against the wall. However, he remembers Jin's lessons and gets back up. He uses the Kazama technique to surprise Heihachi, and then he dominates him with ease. But then the Chang pendant falls out and summons Ogre to the field. Heihachi smiles as this was his plan all along. Jin is reminded of the incident with his mother as he sees Ogre in front of him. He is filled with anger and attacks the demon but is smacked away. The others want to help him, but Heihachi stops them and says they must not interfere with Jin's battle. Now he starts to put up a better fight but is still dominated. All his life lessons starts to flash before his eyes, so he finally begins to attack ruthlessly. Jin eventually ends up killing Ogre, after which he rebukes Heihachi for awakening him in the first place. But then the demon is boosted by evil spirits and revived as an even stronger monster with a serpent arm. Jin is too tired to take him on by himself, so the others join in. However, Warang and Paul are defeated and Xiaoyu is about to be killed. This triggers Jin's trauma, so he gets up and awakens his devil gene to challenge Ogre again. He takes quite a few hits but is unharmed, and then he unleashes a tremendous barrage of attacks, after which he kills Ogre for good with a finisher move. Now Heihachi says Jin has the same curse as Kazuya, but Jin mocks him for his misconception. Heihachi shoots Jin and he falls to the ground, after which he is transported to an alternate world where he sees Jin. Then he transforms into a demonic beast and almost kills Heihachi, but stops before delivering the final blow. He exchanges a glance with Xiaoyu before flying away. And that's the end of the show. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more content like this. Tap the bell icon for regular updates too. See you soon!